The Los Angeles Chargers just got some huge news and it could completely change their postseason path. It's actually a kind of motivation for the Chargers. One game could decide everything, and this update makes things even more exciting. So, what's this unexpected news that everyone is talking about? How does it affect the Chargers' chances moving forward? Stick around as we break it all down and explain why this could be a game changer for the rest of the season. Let's get started. What's up, buddies? Welcome back. If you are new here, make sure you hit the subscribe button. We cover all AFC West news here on this channel. Okay, let's dive into the good news, but before we get to that, I want to hear from you in the comments. What has surprised you the most about this season now that the playoffs are within reach? Was it Jim Harbaugh? Honestly, I'm not shocked by what he's accomplished, but maybe some of you are. A lot of people thought the NFL had passed him by, yet here he is coming in and delivering immediate results. Or was it one of the rookies like Joe Alt or Lad McConkey who made you go, wow, I didn't see that coming? Maybe it was the defense, which has been unexpectedly strong. Let me know your thoughts. Anyhow, coming back to the good news, the Chargers have a real shot at securing the fifth seed. Yes, this is a big deal. If the Chargers win in the Week 18 game and the Steelers lose, the Chargers claim that fifth spot. If the Chargers get the fifth seed, they'll go up against the Texans in the first round. Why is this such a good thing? Out of all the playoff teams, the Texans are having the hardest time right now. They currently have a record of 9-7, and honestly, that's not a playoff-worthy record. With this record, teams in other divisions are still fighting for their playoff hopes. It's honestly hilarious. However, since they are leading their division, they qualify for the playoffs. They've been struggling to figure out their problems and haven't been playing at their best. For the Chargers, this could mean a much easier start to the playoffs compared to facing stronger, more informed teams. The Steelers game on Saturday night is a critical moment for the Chargers because it will determine exactly what they need to do when they face the Raiders. Here's how it plays out. If the Bengals beat the Steelers, it not only helps the Chargers, but is also a must-win situation for the Bengals themselves. The Bengals have to beat the Steelers to keep their playoff hopes alive. Even with a win, they wouldn't automatically qualify for the playoffs because their record would improve to 9-8, tied with the Broncos, who are also at 9-8. Now, this is where things get interesting. If the Broncos lose to the Chiefs, a likely outcome considering the Chiefs' strength, and if the Dolphins lose to the Jets, the Bengals will have a chance to sneak into the playoffs. Because of this scenario, the Bengals will likely play their hardest to secure a win over the Steelers. For the Chargers, this all means they'll have a clear picture of what's at stake by the time they face the Raiders. On the flip side, if the Steelers win their game, it means the Chargers won't be able to move up in the playoff standings, and the Steelers will lock in the fifth seed. This situation gives the Chargers some choices about how to handle their own game. They can decide whether to go all out and play their best players or take a more cautious approach. For example, if one of their key players gets injured or is already dealing with a minor issue, they might choose to take that player out of the game to avoid risking further injury since their playoff spot is already set. On the other hand, if the game has higher stakes for their momentum or preparation, they might push their best players to stay in and finish strong. If I were the Spanos family, this would be an exciting moment. You've got momentum, the playoffs ahead, and options to manage your strategy smartly. Everything seems to be falling into place. Winning changes everything in the NFL. When you're winning, life feels good. Momentum builds, and opportunities open up. It's the kind of moment that reminds you why all the effort is worth it. The Chargers will know exactly what they need to do when they face the Raiders at 4:30 Eastern, which sets the stage for smart game planning. Now let's talk about the Texans. They're locked into the fourth seed and can't move up or down, yet there's been buzz about them going all in and playing aggressively despite their situation. That decision raises questions. Should they risk key players in a game that has no bearing on their seeding? Or should they focus on keeping everyone healthy for the playoffs? What's your take? Keep the rhythm going or rest the stars to avoid unnecessary injuries? Let me know in the comments because opinions on this can vary a lot. The Chargers-Texans matchup has the potential to be a great game, especially with how the Texans approach it. The Chargers are in a strong position, and Jim Harbaugh continues to show just how calculated and bold he is as a coach. It's the kind of matchup that gets exciting, because Harbaugh always seems to have something up his sleeve. We've talked about this before, how important it is to balance the present and the future. For Chargers fans, this is a really exciting time. You're in the playoffs, and anything can happen, but the best part? The future looks just as bright. The team hasn't given up long-term plans for short-term wins. They still have first-round picks, draft capital, and money to spend in free agency. That means they can compete now and keep building for even bigger success down the road. It's a rare and powerful spot to be in. So, looking at free agency in the draft, it's clear the Chargers are in an enviable position. Contrast this with teams like the Rams, who went all in to win the Super Bowl with Matthew Stafford. While they achieved the ultimate goal, they're now dealing with the fallout of that strategy. Tough cap situations and fewer long-term assets. The Jets, on the other hand, seem stuck, especially with Aaron Rodgers' future uncertain. These examples highlight how different teams manage success and sustainability, and the Chargers seem to have struck the perfect balance. winning now while keeping their future intact. One intriguing possibility for the Chargers is a trade for Garrett Wilson. You've probably heard the rumors about Garrett Wilson. Reports are swirling that if Aaron Rodgers returns for another season with the Jets, the team might face a situation where Wilson demands a trade. There's been public friction. Rodgers, after all, pushed for the team to bring in Davante Adams, and that has impacted Wilson's role. Still, Wilson's numbers speak for themselves. Over 1,000 receiving yards and 6 touchdowns, even after adjusting to a new dynamic with Adams in the mix. This makes the speculation about his future with the Jets all the more intriguing. If the Jets decide to move on, Wilson could be a fantastic fit for the Chargers. They have the cap space, the need, and an appealing setup with Justin Herbert. Imagine Wilson moving to the Chargers and joining a good team in warm weather. It's a compelling scenario. While nothing is certain, it's worth keeping an eye on this situation. This balance between present success and future potential is part of what makes the Chargers so exciting. A few videos ago, we looked at mock drafts, and it's clear there's plenty of room for improvement. Whether it's moving on from Joey Bosa, adding a defensive end, running back, tight end, or another wide receiver, there's potential to make some splash moves. With Jim Harbaugh and Joe Ortiz at the helm, you can trust they'll prioritize strengthening the trenches, building a powerhouse that can dominate in the long term. Harbaugh's history at Stanford and Michigan proves his ability to build successful teams by focusing on fundamentals like the run game and grinding out tough wins. To wrap things up, let's take a step back and consider the Chargers from an outsider's perspective. How the Chargers are positioning themselves as a force in the AFC. There's a lot to look forward to, and the combination of short-term success and long-term potential makes this team one to watch closely. Let's take a high-level look at how the Chargers match up with other teams in the AFC. Starting with the Chiefs, there's not much to analyze. As the top seed with a bye, their dominance is well established, so let's focus on the other playoff contenders. The Bills might be the toughest matchup for anyone in the NFL right now. Josh Allen is playing at his absolute peak, and his ability to make game-changing plays sets them apart. On the other hand, the Ravens are a bit of a wild card. With Lamar Jackson, you never know what you're going to get. They're capable of blowing teams out, but they're also prone to off days where nothing seems to click. If the Chargers catch them on one of those stinker days, it could be a winnable matchup. Then there are the Texans and Steelers. The Texans are in a state of uncertainty. C.J. Stroud looked like he was on track to become an all-time great, but he's been struggling lately. The Steelers, meanwhile, seemed strong earlier in the season, but losing 4 or 5 games in a row has dampened their momentum. Both teams appear vulnerable, which makes these potential matchups intriguing for the Chargers. Zooming out to the bigger picture, this season has seen an unusually wide gap between the best and worst team. The Chargers, like many playoff teams, have benefited from stretches of favorable matchups against weaker opponents. For instance, winning 3 games in a row against struggling teams can inflate a team's record and confidence, making them look stronger than they might be when facing top-tier opponents. That's the challenge as playoffs approach. Good teams will finally face good teams consistently, and those earlier wins won't mean much. It's a dynamic that makes predicting playoff outcomes particularly tricky. Throughout the season, many playoff teams have benefited from playing against weaker competition. In the AFC alone, teams like the Patriots, Titans, Browns, Jaguars, Raiders, and Jets struggled significantly. That's 6 teams that were consistently on the lower end. Over in the NFC, the Giants, Panthers, Bears, and Saints fit that same category. This disparity created a situation where strong teams racked up wins against weaker opponents, sometimes inflating their record. But once the playoffs start, everything changes. Good teams will finally face other good teams, and that's where the real tests begin. Sure, it's natural to think, well, of course, that's how playoffs work. But the dynamic shifts significantly. When teams build momentum by rattling off multiple wins against poor competition, it can give a misleading sense of strength. Suddenly, in the postseason, they're up against legitimate contenders, and their previous dominance doesn't hold the same weight. As the playoff picture becomes clearer in the next week, it's an exciting time to follow how this unfolds. For Chargers fans, it's about keeping that momentum and embracing the challenges ahead. If you're enjoying this ride, don't forget to subscribe and stay tuned as we track these developments.